So big week for us this week, Ange. So this is coming off a week where, really long story short. Well, actually, no, it's a long story long.
It's a long story long. Yeah.
We're going to talk all about it, but we made a pretty powerful decision to not reopen our doors, right? So and this is in our brick and mortar gym, right? So as we're talking now, it's the middle of October.
Yep.
And we have been shut down since March because of COVID, and we never really reopened. We did some privates and we did some stuff like that, but we never really reopened full bore. And then this month we just, after, talking and being in communication with our landlord every month, we had the opportunity to get out of our lease 4 years early. And because our online business is doing well, and that's really where our future is anyway, we made the decision to cut that brick and mortar. And I think Dan John, one of our mentors, guides over the years, he's big into like root words and stuff, and he said that the root word for decide is to cut, which is interesting when you think about it, because if we're choosing this direction, it means we're opting out of this direction, and therefore being decisive is powerful and being indecisive is a huge hindrance.
Yep.
Which is a very interesting thing, right? And so yeah, I mean that's sort of the story of where we were is, you had started online training in 2018 when you got pregnant and couldn't be at the gym anymore, and then you did really well with it. And I've always had a couple of one-off clients who just need a program design or something like that. But you started crushing that. And then we opened it up to our gym clients, and we started doing the nutrition coaching with them in somewhere in the middle of 2019. And
right.
it was really nice and stable and had a good foundation.
It was established, definitely.
It was for sure established. And then the pandemic came, and the brick and mortar was gone. And so it's like, what do you do? And a lot of people talk about pivoting the gym, this and that. And we're like, well, we're not going to pivot the gym. We're just going to go all in on what's working right now. You know
and
what
how
I mean?
we can service people
and
best.
how we can best service people. And I think one of the most interesting things was because it's online. You know what I mean? It's online. It's more of a consulting role rather than a rah-rah role. And so clients were getting way better results. Why? Because they had to take responsibility for their own actions.
Yep.
Right? Like there's more of an onus on them. Like, hey, we can only tell you what to do. I mean, that's not even powerful, but we can help guide the process, but you have to engage the process. And so they were more empowered. I feel like the clients were more empowered, they were more empowered to ask questions, figure it out for themselves, go and act and come back and ask more questions. And that's how you see results, right? Whereas, as opposed to show up at 9 a.m. and do what I say in a workout, that's not a super empowering
right.
mindset.
They were actually taking the time to create their own plan, right? We give them the tools, we give them the strategy and the support, but they got to say in what they wanted it to look like.
Absolutely.
Right. Whereas the gym, it was always us designing it and giving them the workout. And yeah, some people love it, some people don't, but they didn't get to actually choose what the next direction would be that they wanted to take. And it just became a very intimate, cool process.
Yeah, for sure. So then, going into, Illinois had some regulations, guidelines and all that stuff to reopen. And every time we did it, or every time a new guideline came out or whatever, it felt like we were going backwards.
And,
it felt like
you kept waiting on those guidelines, right? You would be checking constantly
right.
to see the update, and it was just causing so much anxiety and stress. And
and more importantly, just the thought of it felt like, I started this when I was 27 years old. Now I'm 37 years old.
Right. We were just shy of 10 years.
Just shy of 10 years.
The business, yeah.
Maybe it's okay to move on. You know what I mean? And just being okay with hey man, you got all this identity wrapped up in this. You got all this the sunk cost fallacy, you've invested 10 years in it. You should get more out of it. But at the end of the day, it just felt like I was going backwards and like basically clinging to the past, hoping I could revive the past. And a resilient person is going to look to evolve rather than to try and go back to the way things were. And
you kept trying to.
I kept trying
the
to.
guidelines would come out, and you were trying to figure out what you could do next to hold on to it.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And at the end of the day, it was just like, it's you got to let go. And so when you're rock climbing, like I learned this in Outward Bound, and I thought it's funny, a lesson I learned when I was 15 years old. Like it's still sticking with me now. But I was rock climbing. I was scared of heights, but we had to do it. And when you reach up with your hand, you can reach up and you can grab the next hold with your hand, right? But that means if you want to continue to go up, you have to let go of the other hold to continue to climb. And that's a very powerful metaphor, I think, for life and for all this stuff. We're like, hey, we see something bigger and better, and we're just going to go after it, even if it means cutting out something else that's good. Something else that's good. Like, frankly, we could have made the gym work. We could have. But we wanted to swing bigger, right? We wanted to swing for the fences, right? As opposed to staying safe with what we already knew.
Right,
and I think that's kind of like what really made my decision is I was thinking like, man, I'm a little bit scared to let go of that. Like, I'm good there. I know that I know how to train people in person. I have an established reputation in this community. I have an established clientele. I can hang out here and be good, but I didn't want to. I wanted more. I wanted to be great. I wanted to serve more people. I wanted to evolve my role as a coach and as a consultant or whatever.
And that's what I was going to say. We wanted to serve more people. Mm-hmm. And you and I come at it from a different angle, right? Because you started this business on your own, right? With 0 clients. You left a full-time secure job with benefits and all of that. And you went and you opened up the gym because you felt passion for fitness and exercise, and you had your own transformation with it, right? Of how you used fitness as your vehicle to become a confident man, or whatever you want to say about it. But I didn't start that business with you, right? Like, I haven't had as much of the identity wrapped up with it, but I could see it from the outside, and I observed and I watched how you felt the last probably 6 months, year, in not knowing what direction to take with it, where I joined you later, right? And I became very tied to it, but my identity, I knew, wasn't wrapped up with it as much as yours was. And I also felt that when I got to do this on like online intimate coaching, I got to really know people, right? And that's where I was building my community. But you built those 4 walls, and you built an unbelievable community of people who not only you got to support, but they supported you, right? Like, they got you to where you needed to be in this moment. And like you said, now you're ready for that next level. And you needed all of that. And I've listened, and you've gone back and forth, the last 3 months, 6 months, on what you wanted to do and where it would take you. And you had to kind of come to the idea yourself, like, that you can be valuable in a space.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of got to be ready, but that's also a fallacy. You're not going to be ready.
You're right.
But
what I'm saying, I was patient, and I was there, and it was big for you. This was huge. So.
Yeah. Cool. Well, okay. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to talk about some of the best lessons we learned from closing the gym, right? So there's 4 big lessons, and then I want to just talk about nostalgia, and I want to talk about how to honor your past without clinging to it, So without further ado, because that was a long intro, that was 9 minutes. Without further ado, biggest lessons learned. First and foremost, assigning value to circumstances is a huge negative for a lot of people. So we're constantly looking at stuff. Is it good? Is it bad? Was this a success or a failure, a win or a loss, right? And the reality is that everything that happens to us is neutral in terms of the universe, right? And then we assign value to it. And so if you have ever read Viktor Frankl's stuff, Man's Search for Meaning, it's a book about a guy who was in a concentration camp, right? He literally survived a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. And what he says is the last of the basic human freedoms is your choice to choose how you respond to your circumstances. So nobody can ever take that with you. The whole outside world can come crashing down. Everything external can basically be stripped from you, to the point where basically, Nazis had stolen his physical freedom. They chose when he slept, where he slept, how he worked. But he got to decide, no matter what, how he responded to those circumstances. He was in charge of his internal. And so he decided what values he would assign to what. And I think that is so powerful, and that's why he was such a resilient individual. And as we've talked to people and started having these conversations, like, yeah, we're not opening up the gym, this and that, it's interesting to see the people who responded, oh my God, are you okay? That's so terrible. Oh, this darn pandemic. You know what I mean? Like, it just,
had pity for us.
Had
they
pity
were
for
sad.
us. And I was like, interestingly enough, this wasn't the only, like, these people had, the people who felt that also had a lot of, they assigned negative values to a lot of things, right? And they maybe were more affected, certainly by the pandemic and the external world shaking them. Whereas there was other people who were like, that is so exciting. Like, I can't wait to see what's next for you guys. You can finally do the podcast and this and that. Like, you can
They're
see
like, this was the exact right move.
Those are people who are like, yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I'm just going on with my life because that's the external world and I can only control my internal. And so it's a huge key, if you want to be resilient, is to understand that you get to assign the value for every single circumstance. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you know what? That's hard, because some circumstances suck. Some people have cards stacked way against them, but it doesn't matter. But what's out of your control, it might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility, and it is within your power to decide how you react to it. You know what I mean? And that was a big one for me. I was trying to assign value. Is this a success or a failure? Is this a win or a loss? A couple of years ago, our accountant was like, hey, you should get your business is now at the point where it's an asset, and you should get it evaluated. And we did. And I had no intentions of selling it, but just for our purposes to know what this business was worth. And it was a nice amount. And of course, that was when it was peaking. That was when there was no regulations, blah, blah, blah. And then, fast forward to post-COVID world, it's worth basically nothing. You know what I mean? And so I was like, man, that's such a loss. And then I was trying, sunk cost fallacy, like, I've got to keep pushing forward to get something out of it, this and that. And then I started realizing, man, there's an opportunity cost here. Because if I'm assigning this as a loss, unless I have a sale, then I will never be able to move forward and get wins elsewhere. And there's an opportunity cost. So I was like, man, how about I just remove that negative label of I have to close my doors and turn it into a positive label? Like, cool. The world has forced my hands to literally
and that's
move
where
on to something
your
else.
rah-rah cheerleader wife comes in.
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like, I saw it all along, right?
Yeah,
I was like,
sure.
wow. I was like, this is it. It's right in front of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is literally being spelled out for us. We need to move this way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Cool. So I mean, kind of along those same veins is understanding feelings and logic. Right. So feelings, when an external event happens to you, your natural instinct, you have feelings, and you cannot control them. No matter what anybody says, you can't control your feelings.
Right. You have that thought, and that thought's going to provoke that feeling.
Regardless. But going back to Viktor Frankl, what he says, so it's these all kind of tied together, but they're like different ways of saying it. There's a space between there's a space between the stimulus and your response to it. And that's where you really get to explore everything, unpack, and be like, all right.
I love that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You should read
Say
the book,
it
Angie. There's a space between the response and how you, there's a space between the stimulus and your response to it. And that's where you get to kind of take your power, right?
Brad, I need to sit with that more.
Well, yeah, you should really read the book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. Highly recommend it to basically everybody. Anyway, so what you can do is you can explore things from both a feelings and a logic standpoint, and I think that's totally fine, because I had feelings and emotions around the gym, right? I felt a sense of duty and responsibility to our clients. I felt a sense of nostalgia, to the space, to the community,
to the landlord,
to
right?
to the landlord. Like,
we
that was the
wanted to
feeling. I wanted to
yeah.
do right by him. I'd been, renting from him for 7 years at that point. But then I also had to explore the numbers too, the logic side of it, because a business is obviously built on numbers, right? And so the most successful businesses are aligned with purpose and numbers, right? You can have all the purpose in the world, but if your business model isn't profitable, you're going to limit the number of people you serve. You're going to limit the amount of time you're in business, right? And so it's just balancing those two things and looking at it and saying what makes the most sense from a business standpoint or a number standpoint, and what makes the most sense from, how do I feel about it, and then ultimately how do I take that information and use it as feedback and foundation for decision to align my actions with my desired outcomes, right? And so our desired outcome is to be with our children as much as possible.
Yeah.
Our desired outcome is to do work we love that's fitting with where, that's stimulating and challenging and growing, right? And so for us, creating the podcast, creating, writing more, redoing our curriculum, creating courses.
I was going to say creating courses.
This is all forcing us. This is stimulating, and it forces us to grow, and that's what we want, is to continually evolve. And so that would, that we have to align our behaviors with those desires, with the desired outcome. And of course, from a business standpoint,
this is our livelihood.
Every single day since we closed down the brick and mortar gym, I've been there when the kids woke up, and I've been there when the kids go to bed. And I realized how much I was missing by not being able to do that with a brick and mortar. And I was like, man, maybe it's time to rethink how my behaviors are lined up with my desired outcomes.
I won't forget, it was probably early April, and we're all sitting down together at 5:30, 6 p.m., and I'm just beaming, looking at you and the boys and just thinking, Paul and I haven't been together at this hour in 9 years. But you just get so used to it, right?
Yeah, dang, this is how the other half lives. Huh? Right. They wake up at a reasonable hour, they do a reasonable amount of work, and they come home and have a decent amount of time with their family. I'm like, holy crap. I need to restructure my business to allow that, and that's what it is, right? So we're going to talk about putting yourself first. That's another big lesson here. But
when you went and you looked at logic first emotion, you started to realize.
Yeah, in logic, you can do the math.
Right.
We only have X amount of days with our children. We have 18 years, right? And each phase as their children is so short. So every wake up that I miss, every dinner that I miss is like one of 30 in that particular phase.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, man, I'm not really willing to sacrifice that unless it's for something huge. Right.
We were there for both of their first steps and
Yeah.
so many other first. And I still can't believe that we were able to do that while still following exactly what we want to do with our business.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So the next one I just want to touch on real quick. Well, actually, I'm not. It's going to be a longer one, but is the expectations of others. And so this is something I talked about before, but Angie's a little bit more charismatic than me. She's super positive and just magnetic, and I'm a little bit more I would say my superpower is a little bit more distilling information into actionable, usable steps, that sort of thing. You could even say she's feeling and I'm logic from us, almost, right?
Yeah.
Our strengths complement each other, but we have a shared weakness, which is we're both huge people pleasers. Huge, and it is a big issue, and it's quite frankly cost us a lot of time and money and life over the course of 10 years trying to make everybody happy in our business, And so here's what I want to say about the expectations of others. First of all, you don't know what they expect. You don't know what people expect. You know what I mean?
And you've had this conversation with me
a lot. Quit telling yourself stories about what you think they expect. So, so we were closing the gym, and I'm like, man, I don't want to have this conversation a million times over. They're going to ask a million questions. They're going to be sad. They're going to be angry, whatever it is, right?
And you said you would literally go through every single person
and so I'm
play
thinking,
this story of what exactly they would say to you.
And I'm literally going through, I can see the client's face in my head, and I can see how how I think they're going to react in my head. And so I start having the conversations, And people are like, yeah, awesome, dude. Yeah, I figured, like, why would you want to continue having overhead in a business model that doesn't work in the new world? I'm like, oh, yeah. So
so
cool.
people do think about that.
Yeah, right. So that was cool. You don't know what they expect. Maybe it's positive. And for us, overwhelmingly, it was. Sometimes it's not, right? Some people were a little bit angry and butthurt about us closing the doors of the gym, thought we were selfish, thought we were greedy and all this stuff because we're making a move to essentially have a better life for our family. And here's the deal. You can't control those expectations of people. So you don't know what they expect anyway. But even if you did know, you can't control it anyway. So who cares, right?
Yep.
And then it's also important to know people don't know your full story. People, like, they just don't know the full story. They don't see what you see. They haven't had your experiences. So if you are trying to base your decisions based on the expectations of others, know that whatever they expect of you has incomplete data. You know what I mean? It's just simply incomplete. They can't make the best decision for you because they don't have the full story. Right? They haven't seen, in our cases, the dwindling bank accounts. They haven't seen the years and years put into it. Staying at the gym till 9 at night, cleaning up, being back there at 5, and then realizing, like, man, I've been doing that for 10 years and I'm going to be 40 soon. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? So, just knock that shit out. Like, it's a terrible way to make decisions. You don't know what they expect. You can't control it anyway if it is negative. And if you're making your decisions or you think other people can make decisions better for you, understand that they would be making those decisions with incomplete data, and so it's just a terrible way to make decisions based on the expectations of others or what you think they expect. All right. And then finally, we're going to talk about putting yourself first, which is hard to do. Admittedly.
And we get that.
We get that. Yeah. I
do it a lot to myself.
Yeah. Again, being people pleasers, we definitely give too much sometimes of our time, of our energy, of our mental energy, of our emotional energy, like whatever the case is.
And not just with business. It's with our family. It's with volunteering, community, all of it.
All sorts of stuff. I mean, like, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to pull out specific examples because I don't want anybody to feel triggered. Like, it's nobody's fault but your own.
That's what I was saying.
If you are giving too much of your emotional energy to something, it's not that person's fault.
Right.
They're not stealing your emotional energy. You're choosing to give it to them, probably based on what you think their expectations are.
I was going to say, for me, it's based on expectations.
See how that all ties together?
Yeah.
So when we have to make decisions for ourselves that are a little bit more selfish, here's how I do it. I look at who loses when I don't put myself first. Who loses when I don't put myself first? And so I look at my children now and my family, right? So we're making this decision to have a bigger life, right? To move on, to just have a business that's more fitting for our lifestyle, that has more financial upside and all this stuff, right? And if I don't make that decision, who loses? Well, my kids get to see me less. I'm tired and stressed and cranky for my wife. They lose if I don't make decisions to put myself and my family first, right? And that makes it a lot easier to be selfish and put myself first. Who loses when you do put yourself first? Answer's nobody, usually, right? I'm not talking, of course there's some win-lose situations in the world. That happens. But I would say those are the minority, and then you can make conscious decisions to say, I'm going to put myself second here because I don't want this negative outcome for this person. But generally speaking, nobody loses when you put yourself first, all right? If Angie asks me, do you care if can you go to the office an hour later, right, so you can be with the kids so I can get a workout in? Who loses? Nobody. She wins. She gets her workout in. I win. I got a happy wife who got her physical energy out, right? Like, much better than a wife that doesn't work out. I promise you that. You know what I mean? In terms of mood and emotions and all of that stuff. So,
and you get 1 hour with the boys
and I get an hour with the boys that I absolutely cherish. Like literally, literally in the mornings, I just sit in the nursery with a cup of coffee and just watch them tidal around and interact with each other. It's hilarious, and it just sets the tone for my day. And I'm like, I would not trade this for any amount of money, right? Yeah. And so nobody loses when you put yourself first, right? Like, it could be as simple as I'm going out drinking with my friends, and I've decided that I want to be shredded, and I'm not going to drink. So they order beers and I order Diet Coke. Did they lose? No, they didn't lose. They got what they wanted. I got what I wanted. It's all good. And there's no points for being a martyr. There's just none. Nobody cares. I hate to break it to you, but everybody feels like they are stretching themselves and giving as much as they can.
Yeah.
So nobody's looking at you going, gosh, that person's so great for just laying down their life for me. Like, it's just not the way it works, man. Because everybody's in their own head. Everybody's giving everything they can to their life. You've got to make that assumption. You've got to assume that everybody's doing the best they can. And when you do that, you realize, like, man, who cares? Nobody cares about my trials and tribulations. Everybody has them. How about I do what I've got to do to show up the best way that I can, and then I will actually have more reserves to go and show up and help other people who are everybody's feeling stretched thin. You know what I mean? So putting yourself first just has to be done. It has to. I mean, there's just no other way around it. It's just like a business needs profit in order to serve people. You know, a person needs self-care in order to serve others. It's just the way it is, you know. And I think I've used this analogy on the podcast before, but I like it. You can take a tree and you can chop it down once. You can chop it down once and you can burn that firewood up, and that's cool. But you could also give it water and sunshine, and it can yield fruit for you every single year for years to come. And I think that's a really, really good analogy as well. Give yourself that water and sunshine, workout, sleep, quiet time, reading, whatever it is. Give that to yourself, all right? And so those are like the biggest lessons. And then this one is just, I've been thinking through like nostalgia and stuff like that. And a lot of people, a lot of clients, certainly at the gym, were like, man, I'm excited for you guys, but it's just a little bit sad, right? It's sad to close a chapter, and it's sad that a thing that we had before, a community.
Like that, your gym did this for me.
Right, your gym did this for me.
Me.
This group of people, I met these group of people. I learned these lessons about myself. And I'm like, man, that is so awesome. Like, really, truly, that is awesome. And it just reminds me of a saying that, like, you can't go home again, right? Because, so it's like if you live, so, you're home. And in home, really, in your head, is like childhood home.
Yes. Right?
And then you go out into the world, and maybe you leave home, and you go do something else. You go to college, and you work in the big city, right? And whatever the case is. Unlike a Hallmark movie, when you come home, yeah, the place is still the same, but it's different because the environment changed. The people moved on. Some people moved away, or some people grew and changed their roles. They're not, your friends changed because maybe they used to party and now they're working parents. Like the environment itself changes. And so I guess the best way to explain this is that, basically life is made up of moments, and each moment is unique. Each moment is unique. It's a unique place and time. Every single person, it's made up of people, time. Here, made little notes. I thought I made notes. I don't know where they went. But anyway, I was jotting some stuff down on my little legal pad. So each moment is made out of people, place, purpose, like what were you doing, and where were those people at their time? Like that's the environment of a moment. And the thing about the moment is there will never be another one like it. Each one is a unique fingerprint based on all those interweaving threads of who you were doing things with, because they were at a specific moment in their life, what you guys are doing together, and where you were at, right? And so once that moment's gone, it's gone. But you can still have it and cherish and honor it forever, right? Like you can still look back fondly on that moment, take the lessons you learned, and then sort of honor it later on, right? But I think we get into trouble with nostalgia when we try and relive old moments, recreate old moments. You know what I mean? That's living in the past, and that's just a sad way to do it. And so it's really important to look and say, man, I just, I'm so glad for that place. I'm so glad for those moments I shared. I got to intersect with those people's lives at that time, and it was amazing, right? But now we're moving on. And sometimes I think the saddest thing, and maybe that we can't just, it's really hard to really realize, is that when those amazing moments are happening, we don't recognize it, right? We don't recognize it at the time. Like, this is a super special thing that's taking place. We're just in our own head about like what's for dinner that night and what's going on at work and like whatever the case is, And so when we do look back fondly on these moments, that's awesome. You've had that experience, but then take that knowledge and kind of know like, well, what's happening in this moment right now?
Right.
What's happening in this moment right now? And then what that does is allows you to just be super present and engaged in your current life. And, like I can look right now, like here we're in this office studio, like we're podcasting, there's a lot of scary stuff. Like essentially we're taking a big leap of faith in terms of, our business and everything else. There's a lot of variables, a lot of things could just come crashing down. Maybe, I don't know. It's a little bit scary, and it would be very easy to just be like all caught up in that fear. Like, oh man, there's so much risk. I'm like, but because I've been a little bit nostalgic lately and like looking back at these moments where at the time I maybe wasn't appreciating them for what they were, I feel like I've been really good this week about just soaking up these moments and being like, man, it's stressful. We had to move out of the gym in a little bit tighter time frame to get out of release early and all this stuff, right? But there's all these emotions and all this stuff. But
because what did I say to you on Sunday at our walk?
You told me, you're like, hey, just soak it up. You said that, yeah.
I was like, babe, you're gonna be exhausted. You're gonna be, really, really emotional. And I was like, just stop and remember every moment from the last 10 years, from certifications to the people you met to buying this piece of equipment to
totally
like someone you met through our community, like a physical therapist, and it's just. Remember the good and then get excited for what's next. And
absolutely.
Like looking at us right here in this moment and for how long we've wanted to do a podcast and just share with people, and it's happening.
It is
on the most perfect fall day, and you love fall.
I do love fall. So I think the best analogy, and I'm going to butcher the analogy, is that like time and places are like a river. So a river is ever changing, like it's ever moving. You know what I mean? So you can go back to the same river. You can stand on the same banks of that river. But every year, the banks are a little bit different. They've eroded a little bit. The specific fish that are there at that time may have died, and now there are new fish in their place. The people who are fishing that river have changed. There's maybe a new house is built on. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just such a great analogy for like the sort of ecosystem of time and moments is like the environment might look the same, but all the characters that make up that environment are constantly changing, and the world is constantly changing. And I think that's the most powerful thing we can have to sort of move on, and really just say, hey, I cherish this past and I honor it, but like I'm moving on to my future. And so it reminds me of my favorite book, A River Runs Through It, or it's a short story actually. It's one of my favorite movies, and it's if you've never seen it, it's like a 90s movie with Brad Pitt. It's based off of a short story, which is amazing. But the movie's like 3 hours long, so it's not short at all. But basically, it's about these like brothers, and they grow up with their dad fly fishing, and then the end just has this like beautiful sort of monologue read by Robert Redford in his beautiful baritone voice, and there's just kind of like old man fishing, and it's one of the characters, and then it's Robert Redford kind of speaking over him, and I just think it's like so appropriate, and I'm going to sort of read it because it reminds me of how to be nostalgic, but also move on with your life. So, old man fishing in the river that he fished in as a kid with his dad and his brother. So it says, now nearly all those I loved and did not understand when I was young are dead, but I still reach out to them. Of course, now I'm too old to be much of a fisherman. And now, of course, I usually fish the big waters alone, although some friends think I shouldn't. Like many fly fishermen in western Montana, where the summer days are almost Arctic in length, I often do not start fishing until the cool of the evening. Then, in the Arctic half-light of the canyon, all existence fades to a being with my soul and memories and the sounds of the big Blackfoot River in a 4-count rhythm and the hope that a fish will rise. Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it. The river was cut by the world's great flood and runs over rocks from the basement of time. On some of the rocks are timeless raindrops. Under the rocks are the words, and some of the words are theirs. And so that's where I'm going to leave it for today. That's where we're at. And I think a lot of people have made some changes in their life due to the pandemic. And it's easy to want to go back to the way things were. But you just simply can't, So honor the way things were. Honor the memories you have. Cherish them. And, get excited about what you can build. Right? So, if you guys are interested in more about what we do, just go to our website, antidiet.co, antidiet.co. That's our fitness and health stuff, which is obviously not a ton of what this podcast was about. But this particular episode was about maybe the philosophy that we bring to our health and fitness, because it is about counting macros, but it's about a whole hell of a lot more than that. So that's what I'm going to leave you for today. Have a good one, guys.